Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. We are going to talk about automation, but not only automation. We wanted to give you tips and best practices on methodologies for successful process automation. And just let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Delphine Coille. I've been working for Bonitasoft for the last 6 years, first as a customer success manager, and now as an evangelist and community manager. And today I thought that it would be really interesting to tell you about my 15 years of experience in the quality, process automation, improvement, optimization environments. And I'm really pleased today to be with Kay Winkler. Kay, I will let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Delphine. So yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for joining. And hopefully it's gonna be very interesting and practical. So we have a lot of topics to discuss and to present. So my name is Delphine mentioned, Kay Winkler. Working at NSI, NSI Soluciones, where we from Panama basically partner with Bonitasoft and cater to the regional market in everything BPM, RPA, ECM. And with Bonitasoft, of course, everything related to BPM. We are also from Panama, hosting the APPMP. So that's the Association of Business Process Management Professionals, where we dedicate ourselves to training, coaching, and certifying BPM professionals. Yeah, and with that out of the way, let's start.
Yes, let's start. So we are going to shut down our cameras just to make sure you can listen to us correctly, but we wanted to say hello, and then we will maybe put the camera on again during the question session. Talking about questions, as we want it to be as much interactive as possible and make sure that we can share our experience, we invite you to ping us or ask a question directly in the chat, in the question chat panel. And maybe if you want to share something about your own experience, feel free to do it as well. We will be happy to open the mic. So let's start now. I shut down my cam. So as an introduction, why are we talking to you today about digital transformation project based on BPM solution? Because when I've been working in this area, being at Bonitasoft, talking to people, to consultants, to partners, to customers, I realized that it was important as well to talk about methodologies and not only about tools and developments. So we decided to scan through the best practices in common issues of a business process optimization project in 5 chapters. This one is the first chapter of this series that will go from before you start your project until the production and what you are going to do afterwards, and going through each step based on Bonita. For example, how you implement with Bonita, what are the best practices for development, and so on. For any chapter, if, for example, you do not feel you would be the best person and you are not relevant, we encourage you to talk to your teams, because maybe someone from your team will be interested in a next chapter. So today we are going to share our experience and our feedbacks on our customers' projects, partners' projects, on the challenge, and especially the human challenge that is a project, an implementation project based on BPM. So let's start. Let's start with the type of project. Well, we can start and ask us the question of what is really this kind of business process automation and optimization. Is it a typical IT project, Kay?
Well, I mean, as you already stated, laying out the foundation and looking at preparing everything, that's one of the key questions you have to ask yourself. Looking at BPM, business process management itself, it kind of implies that besides looking at things IT, you also have to look at conceptual things, structures, people, business goals, and methodologies. So it in fact is not just as you state here, pushing or migrating something old to a new system or just the system itself. It combines various factors. So you have things like IT, of course, which is
Mm-hmm.
crucial, which is very important, but also all the other components you have to take into account. And that's actually,
Yeah, I totally agree.
yeah, and that's actually the very first failure many people that start with automation do, looking at the whole initiative just as a simple IT project. Absolutely, it's not.
Yeah, I totally agree because most of the time when you think about automation, business automation project, people think about tools. Sometimes they think about ERP, so they think computer science, they think IT. But I totally agree with you that it's really larger and it's talking about methodology, about organization. And maybe you can explain us, Kai, a bit why it's like that and what is BPM about.
Well, you don't have to necessarily overcomplicate everything. So many many of the things we do when we implement BPM initiatives have to do with common sense, right? So a lot of things are things you would do naturally anyways. But to lay it out in a structural fashion, you would divide at least between those two components. BPM more in the sense of a framework, a methodology. So basically, what we do, and the BPMS, which kind of signifies everything related to the technologies, the underlying technologies. So there you have the BPMS suite or system that kind of powers or leverages the effects of automation itself. So in the methodology side of things, when you look at what we do, you will confront components during process automations where you define business KPIs, things you want to do better when you talk about automation. So the effects of automation, saving times, saving efforts, and so forth. So you define KPIs, you define a framework how to measure those KPIs, you define service level agreements, also things that kind of surround the goal, the business goal, and then you go over to the BPMS or the technology itself and kind of leverage that, implement that with with the technical tools. So those are the base components you have to keep in mind.
Mm, yeah, and from what I saw, it always impacts several departments, teams, and that's really a real change in the way to work, not only a typical IT project. And that's maybe what we can see as well now. Oh, sorry, I went through two slides. uh, when we talk about automation, here we cannot say it's simply automate a process, just say we come from manual to automation. We saw that it's really a long-term transformation. It's a continuous process. It's a continuous improvement. If you want to optimize, to improve SLAs, improve your quality, you will do it continuously. And that's something that exists for a while. We all know that it can be obvious. But when it's implemented, it's not always obvious, I guess. Another very important point I see, and that's something that we talk about those days, is the fact that BPM is really using components as part of the process and integrate different types of components. But for example, to those nowadays, we talk about automation, and that's a kind of buzzword those days. And most of the people, when they think automation today, they think RPA sometimes. But just as a parenthesis, I would like to say that it's quite different. If I take the example of a call center, call centers use robots, and I would like to take the example of one customer I had that was a senior care management call center. And the fact is that they wanted to give the best service possible, and especially make sure that the calls would be assigned by an agent as quickly as possible to make sure that the people would not be in danger or would not lack anything. Sorry, when they called. So what they did is combine robots with BPM, and that's exactly how it works to optimize. You cannot automate complex tasks with robots. When you use a robot, it will just replace a simple task with uh, automation, and then you can combine it with BPM process to optimize the rest of the process. And that's what they say. What do you think, Kay, about this overall transformation on your side?
Well, there's several things. I mean, yeah, if you look at the cycle you showed in the previous slide, yeah, I think there maybe if you go one slide
This
or two
one,
slides back,
yeah.
yeah. Here, for example, the keyword, as you rightly mentioned, is iteration. So, iteration is one of the other or additional key concepts you have to take into account in everything BPM. So that's basically also a narrative you will hear all over again when we talk about best practices in BPM. So you don't necessarily do everything at once, but you have a kind of continuous life cycle, and that has also to do with the transformation. Yeah, talking about buzzwords, right? Like you mentioned, there are buzzwords for automation, RPA, robotics, and so forth. Yeah, or BPM a couple of years back. Yeah, and I don't think necessarily the transformation is meant to be with a single initiative, so that you basically purchase a BPM tool, go ahead and implement all the processes at once, and finalize a huge project with a digital transformation. That's usually not how it happens. Yeah, so one of the best practices to gather a continuous success is basically go and iterate progressively and build on top of each iteration to make it better. So you get to a transformation at a certain degree or at a certain point, but not necessarily at once. So that's why the continuous cycle is so important. And
Mm-hmm.
also what you
And
mentioned,
then,
the coexistence. Sorry, the coexistence of robots and other systems. So right now, RPAs, all the hype, and rightly so. I mean, there are a lot of good things you can do with robotics, and with iterations, integrations. BonitaSoft has a lot to offer, right? For example, the UiPath integration, the native UiPath integration, UiPath has with BonitaSoft, and vice versa, where you can basically integrate an end-to-end process into microservices. So microservices perfectly can be a bot. In your example, if you have a call center and you want to create a bot that basically captures the event of, hey, there was somebody who called, uh, kick off a process, an end-to-end process. So the bot will be the microservice kicking off an end-to-end process. That works perfectly. Or here in this graphic, you see that the BPM usually, if you look at the effects of automation, right? Yeah, when we talked about defining KPIs, service level agreements, define the goals, the business goals. Um, the effects of automation usually come from saving time, and saving time by automating policies, calculations, and integrations. So that basically, the BPM allows you to have a single point of entry, a single user interface, but behind the scenes, a typical successful project or process integrates to a bunch of things, be it an ERP or legacy system like an RPA or an enterprise content management, a CRM, yeah, a product inventory management or digital asset management like PIM, DAM, artificial intelligence, business intelligence, so that you basically can have a single form, do whatever you have to do end to end, but behind the scenes you have all those vertical integrations to make it happen. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And now that we have talked about, well, overall BPM codes, methodologies, but also about how we see BPM and how it can be integrated, I think maybe we can share with everybody our experience and get feedbacks. So we wanted to tell you about few pitfalls that we thought would be good to avoid methodologies, best practices, and common sense to be successful. Okay, we don't think we have the God reality, and really we know that maybe some concept might look obvious, but in the reality, we still see lots of issues done by companies when they implement this kind of projects. That's why we thought it would be interesting today to talk to you about that. And to start with the first one, well, that's my opinion, and that's what I saw. When a project is too ambitious, it's quite difficult. And to illustrate that, I wanted to talk about the fable of La Fontaine. I don't know if people know that. The frog who aspired to become as big as an ox. Okay, what it is really a frog knowing an ox that was really big, really strong, and the frog wanted to be the biggest and the strongest. But because the frog was really ambitious, I really wanted to be bigger. But the fact is that doing that, she died, and we don't want our process to die, of course. So if you want to start your process, if you start with the biggest and the more complex, because you say, yes, that's the best process, that's the biggest process of the company, we are going to show it and show what we can do, and it will have a lot of impact. Be careful of not being too ambitious, because if you start too big, and if you want to do everything at once, it might be risky. Don't you think, Kay?
Yes and no. First of all, the frog is great. So that frog looks very French. Look at the T-shirt with the blue stripes.
Yes,
So
of
basically,
course.
yes, yeah. I mean, there are two schools of thought, yeah, and usually in our region, so yeah, in developing economies, yeah, people that drive initiatives for automation usually also face the challenge of how to justify a project, how to get the return on investment, yeah, and to present to the board, basically that's how much it's going to cost, and that's what it's going to take to automate, and then looking for the justification in order to go ahead and execute this initiative. That in correlation that with being the first initial steps of automation is always the hardest, right? You have the learning curve, you have to buy the servers, licenses, and whatnot. You have to train people. It's always more expensive at the beginning, and it gets cheaper down the road with iterations. So the risk is basically searching for a too small project at the beginning that doesn't yield necessarily the return of investment in order to justify the next steps. So either you do only a single project and then it dies off because there was no measurable return of investment, or it doesn't get approved in the first place. So usually our recommendation most of the times is the other way around. Go for a very aggressive, very visible, very measurable process.
With a lot
So
of business value. That's what you say.
yes, exactly. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, very big. And I agree with you. You have to show business value. So if we think about what you said and what I said, maybe we have a way to find the right process. Look at it. We want to maximize the business value and show the quickest return on investment possible. That's what you said, no?
Exactly.
You want to show that it works. But also, you don't want to have your developers fail on their first project, otherwise they won't do it again. You want to make sure that you take into account the learning curve, as you said. And for the users, we don't want to avoid the tunnel effect and be results oriented. So why not choosing a process that will bring a lot of business value, but not too complex? That's easy to say. Yes, we know. but but it depends on each company. And it's, for example, Kai, do you have an example? I would say 10 to 15 tasks at the beginning, maybe.
Yeah, there's a good rule, and you're absolutely right. So balance is key, and it's not easy. And usually there's a rule to not exceed a maximum of 12 maximum certain tasks for an initial process. That doesn't mean you're not able to create additional processes and additional tasks or sub processes, right? But try to limit yourself, looking at the process complexity you laid out there, at a process that doesn't exceed some 12 certain steps at most.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a good example. Quickly, just to quickly, a big French industrial called Léon Gros. They are building uh, offices. They chose this kind of process, quite quick to implement. In 2 months, they had implemented it, and it was really important because it was building the group for the which is the first main step when you want to build an office. So they saw really the benefits for that. It was quick. In 2 months, the process had been implemented, and it was not so difficult to implement. This way, people were happy. They saw the return on investment, and the direction invested more on new processes.
Right. Very good. Very good.
So if we follow what you said, then if you want to have a quick return on investment, how do you work?
Well, and that's just an abstraction. So yeah, one of the key questions here to follow the logic is how do I measure success? Yeah, now that I know what to look for, how do I measure it? Yeah, and one of the method, and it's by no means meant to be the only one, is kind of segregate the process into its basic components. Yeah, here we see the three key components, basically for deriving from the definition of a process to be a conversion of a given input with a sequence of structured activities in order to achieve a desired output. So with those three components in mind, you would want to look at optimizations on all three of them. So on an input level, you would like to want to optimize the quantity. And depending on what kind of process you have processes that are focused on maximizing the output. You do as much as you can, usually commercial processes. Yeah, so you want to sell as much as you can with the least amount of effort and input in that sense. But also you have other processes where you don't necessarily care to maximize the output, where you basically want to do what you have to do with the least amount of input. Yeah, those are typically back offices or supporting processes. Yeah, things like vacation requests, purchase requests. So while we all like vacations, yeah, it's not necessarily our goal as a company to maximize and give everybody vacation at once, right? So yeah, that is the other kind of process, but same structure all nonetheless. So you have those three components. You want to optimize the quantity of things you have to use as an input, be that effort, workforce, technical input, licenses, and whatnot. The quantity, quality, and time optimization on an activity level, where you basically want to do things faster if you can, yeah, with better quality, meaning with more automation. If you automate more and the process does basically takes care of quoting, calculating, yeah, applying the policies automatically, you save time and you will become more consistent with your output, right? And do that faster. And that translates always into some sort of an economical optimization and measure that. So yeah, the key here is also, as promised, the continuing narrative about continuous improvement. So that is not meant to be a linear thing, but focus on the first KPIs to be measured at the beginning. Put that in place, automate that, and keep measuring. Measure the results and improve from there. So iterative approaches.
Yeah, I get the point, but you agree with me that if when you start, you don't analyze and measure the benefits you want to have, you can do what you want. You could totally miss out what will be improved, no?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that happens more often than not. And what you mentioned is key. Common sense. It's all too often not so common. So yeah, you're right. You have
Oh
to.
yeah, because as you said, common sense is not so common because I have seen plenty of projects where people were starting, we want to automate. And I have a good example for that. A French administration wanted to get rid of paper. So they were said, okay, we get rid of all paper on this process. It was a kind of healthcare process, okay? They started automating. So they said, okay, this task is manual, done by this department. I automate it in this tool. I use BPM to integrate all tools and I automate everything. Yeah, great. But at the end, the department were doing things twice sometimes because that not thought about the change it would imply to automating a tool and not using paper, where people before were just standing on, going to the next desk and saying, okay, can you help me and sign on this document, please, so that I can go on and do my next task. So if you don't think before and you don't analyze, maybe you can do things that are totally unuseful on your project.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Delphine.
So Kai, I will let you maybe conclude on this and talk about the value-based approach that we really recommend.
Sure. So that's yet another abstraction. But if you dive into if you zoom in the what, now that we know what to measure, but also we want to analyze what to do, the value-based approach can look something like this. Yeah, and that is also a very recycled methodology. You see that for continuous improvements a lot. For sometimes you see such a circle in Scrum initiatives. So that's nothing really new, but it applies. And it's very powerful. So basically, depending on where you stand with the process, if you are a beginner implementing your first automation, your first process, your first BPM, you most likely are going to start with the design slice of that circle, where you start and look at the process as is, looking at the process end to end, basically defining what am I doing right now in detail, what is good and what has to be enhanced, prioritized, and measured. And that kind of bleaches into the analyze component. So where you go with that is to define and to translate into numerical values, measurable values, what exactly you want to automate with that first initial step. Um, and optimize as much as you can. And the optimization, as mentioned before, comes from the automation effect. So optimizing here means things like integrating to an ERP, integrating to our CRM. So if you want to populate a form field with typing in Delphine as a name, populating all the Delphine information we already have from an ERP or CRM system, that's an optimization. Put that in place, put that in production, and start monitoring. And based upon the delta, be positive or negative, start improving on your design. So continuous cycle, very basic, but it has to be put in place if you basically want to approach the value-based methodology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this goes with an iterative cycle. Sorry, one of our banking customer in Switzerland has exactly implemented that and they have set success metric at the beginning of the first loop, and regularly at the end of one loop they were measuring success metrics. So they were monitoring regularly the improvement, and then they were adapting the process and their design. That's exactly what you said. And then they were keeping an eye on what they were doing and not forgetting where they wanted to go. And that's something we are going to see just after. But before we talk about where we want to go and objectives, I think it's important as well to remind people that this kind of project is not only, and that's what we said at the beginning, an IT project. So I chose this 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 picture because I like the movie, and also because it's really interesting as an illustration to say, okay, you need a pilot in your plane to make sure that you are going to to land on correctly, and that's where we need the not only the CIO of the IT team, but only the input and the commitment of all the business team, business directors, and also the teams and key users, for example. I don't know, Kay, if
Yeah, and I
you
like the movie too.
yeah,
So
you like the movie too, no?
yeah, yeah. So but yes, no, you're right. What you want to make sure, and that's one of the other common sense components, right? You want to make sure that everybody who's kind of involved, we spoke a lot about end-to-end processes. So if you look at it from a very high level, end-to-end means the whole value chain. So if you go through a process that's really end-to-end, it kind of starts with a customer request and ends with a made product or service, and touches all the departments in between, including providers. So you absolutely need a representative for each component on board, so to say, on the plane, in order to make it work. And there are several approaches for that. The best one in our experience is implementing a lot of banking processes, mission critical processes, telco, and so forth, is to make sure that you have a matrix approach. So not necessarily the project itself has to reflect the hierarchy of the company, but the involved roles. So you usually have somebody from the business side on different levels. So you have process owners, which are more on the managerial level, people that kind of own the department, own the business goals, and below those business owners, you have the subject matter experts that don't necessarily know all the process end to end, but specific key components that comprise the process, or the process is comprised of. In addition to that, you have, of course, IT personnel. So you have IT managers, but within IT, you also have people that are in charge of the databases, the integration level, security, business analysts that look at the KPIs and data warehouses in order to store the information a process produces into a repository. Things like that. So basically, lay out an entire structure, and in the upcoming webinars, we go into further detail what specific roles those are and how you can organize them. But here for now is think about roles, making sure that everybody who is some sort of has a relation or a stake in the process has to participate.
Yeah, exactly. And the first step is to validate and share the objective together and the expected value between business stakeholders and business IT, and as you said, at all level of the hierarchy. I would add here that it's important to make it simple and clear, the objective, to make sure that you stick to the objective and you don't spend 80% of your time on 10% of the value. I guess you already saw this kind
Right.
of pitfall, no?
Exactly, and that's another golden rule, like the one we mentioned, that for a process don't exceed necessarily 12 to maximum 13 process steps. There's a rule that states that don't automate the exception, automate the rule. So if you want to really get a return of investment and have the effect of automation, and that's usually what happens with beginners very often, once being very motivated, which is a good thing, they try to automate everything, thinking a lot about the exception of things that eventually can happen, or that eventually happen every once in a while in the operation. Those are things, hey, if you have an exception and that happens only once in a while, you don't have rules for that, you don't have a roadmap for that, manage that as a case, or manage it manual. There's no way in hell you can get a return on investment from that, right? So stick to what you do in volume, repetitive, and where you have a structure, rules in place. Automate the rule, not the exception. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just as to illustrate what you were saying, make sure that you pay attention to the quality and the skills of the resources that you are going to put on the project. Not only technical team, development team, but also, as you said, you really have to make sure that you have the right business team, the right business users. And to do so, something we use at Bonitasoft, so I wanted to share our own experience to make sure that those people are collaborating and that you identify the right people. Sorry. You have to make sure that you understand the users and the people. So here you see that you have two people, Delphine and Kai, but how can they collaborate and talk together? Because we have totally different kind of profile. We use a methodology that maybe some of you have already heard about in the marketing area, but which is totally different from marketing for us, which comes from a user-centric conception, which is called personas. What is that? It's the way to build virtual people, virtual persons, profiles, depending on how they would react and use, on what they like, on what is their profile, and how you are going to address them. The goal here is really to meet the requirement and to maximize the user experience of your platform. So for example, if you develop an application, it will be used by different types of profile. For example, you can have an operation manager that is going to manage your team. You can have a business analyst, which is different profile. That's the kind of profile we have in Bonitasoft. But you can also have someone we call Cindy, for example, which is a citizen developer, which is someone in the business area that is kind of developing, touching a bit of technology. So we try to identify them and put a kind of virtual identity card. And for example, here, Delphine, myself, I am a citizen developer. I have a very experience in the B2B field. I'm not an engineer at all, but I learned I'm really interested in technology, in everything related to computing, IT, BPM, quality, and so on. I could have been a developer, but I'm not. And in my previous life, I've been project manager, I've been quality manager or business analyst. I'm able to manage technical resources, but also all the kind of resources, human resources. And I expect uh, from an automation project that it helps you um, making sure that everything works. And in order to quote that, you have what I would say. I would say an automation project is like a jungle expedition. You never know what threats await you, but you fall in a state of wonder when it all comes together. And as a citizen developer, I will be I will interest uh, Kai, because Kai is the developer. Don't you, Kai?
Yeah, not really, but I'm flattered. I'm flattered. So first of all, that's how I look when I don't shave. So and I feel young with 29 years old. Yeah, but yes, absolutely. And it's very innovative what we can use with such a methodology. First of all, personas. That's something, as you see, it's very easy to do. If you look at my profile here, if I would be like a mere technical oriented person, or look at Delphine more from a product management profile, then it becomes clear how to redact the requirement, right? How to write it down. Yeah. And if we use an approach like Kanban, Scrum, in order to organize our projects, the cards, the user story now can be formulated around those profiles. It makes it far easier. For example, here, me being a technical person, I would like to hear about bits and bytes, right? So if somebody it tells me the user story, I don't want to necessarily see a PowerPoint presentation, but I want to see an XML schema. I want to see how the data is flowing. I want to see the API distribution or the architecture, instead of maybe something more end user or front end oriented. And with that in mind, I think it's very easy to do, and it's very effective. And also, if you look at that, you don't have to limit that for only for the internal team. So if you, for example, have a matrix, a project matrix, where you have a project manager, you have a business analyst, you have a subject matter expert, 1, 2, 3, and the business owner, all of them have a card like this one, like Kai the developer, you can also extend that for the process users themselves. That can be including external users, that can be your customers or your providers. In the end, it helps and it goes a long way to understanding in depth how your customer, internal or external, how your peers work and function, and the time you spend doing that, yeah, saves you a lot of time when executing the project. And that doesn't have to be limited to BPM initiatives. It just so happens to be very effective there too. Yeah.
Yeah, especially as if we think about this kind of project, it's a real cultural change. So if you know this kind of persona and you can address them, you can also address the change and help them adapt, no?
Exactly, and their culture components altogether, things, the pitfalls we mentioned to overcome, communicate them effectively. One thing we see a lot of times, when users create their budget and their project structure, they try to make like one process to rule them all. They kind of come up with the omni-channel process that covers everything, and that goes directly into all the pitfalls we mentioned before, like having a monster Frankenstein of a project that never ends, is highly complex, never nobody really understands, and most of the times engaging into cultural change requires also understanding the iterative process to do several steps, but also kind of pre-commit that there is going to be more than one BPM initiative, being BPM more culture itself than a technology. Absolutely.
So if we want to kind of conclude and launch also, well, ideas for our next slides, Kai, sorry, what would you tell us about all that we were talking about? Iteration, think agile, be agile.
Yeah. So to bring it all together, to consolidate it, key components, understand the process and the process components, understand what to measure and how to measure, conform a team on a matrix level, not necessarily a hierarchical approach, but a functional approach. And make sure that you have a culture of communication, effective communication, and iteration in place. And also the keyword here, agile and iterate, doesn't necessarily mean you have to use always agile methodologies as a project management tool. And that's something we dive into the later presentations that come up with. So you can also perfectly use a waterfall strategy for your BPM projects, or a mixture of something that combines a Kanban execution of waterfall components, or put a waterfall project within Scrum sprints. That's all possible as long as you are structuring it right. So agile means basically don't over structure, or don't be overly aggressive on using the simplest and easiest back office process, nor the biggest one, the most complex one. And remember that in the end, BPM has to do lots around, or has to do lots of with people, human interactions, human centric processes, and
Mm.
keeping to account the human interaction itself.
Oh yeah, and tools are here just to help, I guess. For example, if we illustrate that with the Bonita, and that's something we are going to see in the next chapter and the next chapters as well, Bonita will help you iterate, thanks to continuous integration, thanks to the fact that when you put a process in production, you can modify it and redesign part of the process, and then put a new version in production. You can collaborate through Git, you can use agile methodology, but it's only a tool. And really, we don't have to forget we are all humans, and that humans are the key actors. Even if we want to use automation, if we at Bonitasoft, we used a tool, we implemented a tool which is intelligent continuous improvement based on process mining. We always say that we don't replace human, we just augment human, and we help them. And I'm totally convinced about that. What would be your conclusion, Kai?
Yeah, I think if you look at Bonita Soft itself, there's so many things you can use out of the box that help with that. To begin with, BPMN standards, right? You can kind of create your flow charts and the process description, the process to be as is in a standardized fashion. So that's very important. Then yeah, things more advanced things like the continuous deployment with Dockers and Docker integration, where you kind of can do the iteration without this being a nightmare each time. If you look at all the technologies, yeah, it is a struggle. Yeah, to stop production over weekend or overnight, do the deployment, test the deployment, go live, roll back. Yeah, so those are things that Bonita Soft makes a difference natively. So yeah, and yes, you're right. We are all humans, and if you look at the technology, everything we mentioned is kind of secondary to the main struggles to organize a good team and to put a good communication within the team in place first. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I think we are done for now. Let's switch to questions.
Hi, I'm jumping in. I'm Laura from Bonitasoft, and I will just ask the question to you, Delphine, and you, Kay. So the first question for you guys, it's about RPA. As regards RPA, what solution works best with Bonitasoft? Is it UiPath or Automation Anywhere, or do you use other solution?
Okay, I think I will answer this one. We have a technical partnership with the UiPath. So that's really easy to integrate Bonita with UiPath because UiPath has two connectors in its marketplace, and we also have two connectors on our side to communicate with the UiPath robots. And we use the callback API to make sure that the messages are going back through to UiPath. But you can still use other RPA tools. One of our Spanish partner integrated another tool with Bonita, and it worked perfectly well. So you use the APIs, and it will work. But
Exactly.
if you want to make it
I
easy,
second that. Yeah, I agree with that. While UiPath is maybe more native, so it's a couple of clicks. Yeah, all other RPAs we used before, and we tried out a couple of them, work perfectly fine with the BPM platform with Bonita Soft.
Thank you, guys. I have another question. What are the key components of BPM?
Well, maybe let's look at it from a technical perspective, and then see if we can complement that with the methodologies. So if you look at the system itself, there are several, and I hope I don't forget anything. But if you look at it from an abstract level, you have the process engine. Basically, that's one key component that allows you to draw and to automate the process sequence. So basically, say if something in step A happens, go to step B. If not, go to step C. So kind of lay out the flow chart. And that's usually a dedicated BPM engine that takes care of that. Another component for the system itself has everything to do with data and databases. So the process variables, things like who's going to do what, who's assigned to a specific process or task, how much time do you have, what happens with policies. So everything that makes this the process work in the end are variables that are stored in a database. And the second portion of the database is everything the process captures on a form level. So basically the name, last name, date, requested amount, and whatnot. Everything that passes through that also gets stored in the database. So database would be a second component. Yeah, a third component would be everything related to forms. So Bonita Soft, for example, has a very strong form builder, which is a component dedicated to create with as little effort as possible interactive forms. So on the form level, for example, if you say, if you select a product A, enable form field B. If you select any other product, open another combo. So basically, it give life to the end user forms. That would be another component. And then you have something called the rules engine. So the rules engine is basically dedicated to defining what happens in terms of policies and automating policies. So if something occurs on a data level, on the flowchart level, how the process is going to react. So that's an additional portion. And the last one for most platforms is when you see Gartner and everybody else evaluating platforms, they sometimes call it IBPMS, the intelligent portion. And one part of the intelligent itself, or intelligence itself, refers to dashboard, business intelligence, and reports. So a report component where you can create your widgets in order to show the pie charts and the workloads and the distribution in a graphical manner, but also can integrate other business intelligence platforms like Power BI, Tableau, and whatnot. So those are the base components of systems. In addition to that, methodology-wise, I would say BPM is about process automation, meaning looking at compliance, policy compliance, time compliance, and workload compliance. So those are the main objectives, so to say, on a methodology level or conceptual level that BPM has to accomplish. I hope that answers part of the question. If not, shoot a follow-up question and we go into detail.
Thank you, Kai. I think a question for you, Delphine. How Bonitasoft integrate with SAP?
Well, we use mainly two connectors called SAP GOC2 and GOC3 in order to make sure that you can perform requests in the SAP database. That's the main way people are integrating with SAP today. I don't know, Kai, if you have other ideas. I have not heard about API.
Yeah, there are native connectors you can use. So you can connect. But it also depends on what version of SAP or ERP you have. So it can be the on-premises one, SAP HANA. Then you have SAP Business, Business One, Cloud SAP. So basically, depending on what you have. If the native connectors are not sufficient, you can always use web services. So we had at least 5 or 6 projects where we ended up integrating to different ERPs, including SAP. And on many occasions, we ended up calling APIs or web service calls. REST APIs, web service definition language 2.0 to integrate to those systems. So it's all basic, pretty much standardized. So we didn't have any occurrence where we couldn't integrate to SAP specifically.
If I want to implement BPM at my organization, what should be the line of action from technical perspective?
Great question.
That's something, yeah, good question. That's something we are going to see deeper in the next webinars. But just to give you a kind of input, you have different phases. The first one would be a kind of discovery phase where you analyze, where you review the process, all the steps, where you define the points where you can add value, optimize things. Then you have the design step, but you can also start with the definition of your data model. So you don't really have an order here. You will work on those steps how you want. But you define the data model, you define your processes, your steps, how you want to optimize them, and then you will define the user interface. And the integration goes to make it work and orchestrate everything. And
Right.
then you define your architecture to make sure it works, because otherwise you can have surprises.
Right. Yeah, and architecture is key. So it all depends on the business model. There are things you have to take into account, like how important is the process in terms of availability. So if that is a 24/7 process, if you're going to host your process on the cloud, so basically install everything on Azure or AWS. On a local server, on a server farm, and the answer to that usually has to do with the business case behind it. Pretty much everything is possible. We have implemented Bonitasoft, for example, on premises, local machines, virtual machines, very tiny implementations, which work perfectly for certain back office processes. And mission critical processes, like the case we published for Copper Airlines on the webpage, if you're interested into that, there we think about farms, server farms, clustered servers that account for redundancies, outages, high availability, and take that into account, because those are mission critical processes for international firms where you have to take that into account. But yes, there's a roadmap for that, and we will go through that. Next session.
Next chapter.
Thank you. That's the perfect transition for my next question. It's about this webinar series. What will be, how many webinars will there be, and what's the next one about?
Yeah, I plan to have 5 webinars. So the next one will be about the implementation process. So all the steps, best practices about that, what we just talked about. Then the 2 next webinars will be about, we are going to dive into collaboration between business and developers on studio, for example, when to design, to work on the data model and so on, and then work on more on what is really important on the architecture point of view and web dev best practices, to make sure that you go deeper and deeper in the methodologies. And the last one, last but not least, and that's something people often forget, is what happens when you are in production. Because when you're in production, you have different things to do. First of all, the maintenance and improvement, continuous improvement of your process, and then what to do next. So we wanted also to address this. I would like, and I hope I can make that, to do a webinar every 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay. Okay. So I want to automate procure to pay cycle. Please guide. So if you have some advice.
Yeah. Procure to pay, they're templates, not necessarily pre-made templates, but we have done it a couple of times. And it can be something very simple or can be something very complex, depending on how detailed you want the process to automate. The purchase to pay, procurement to pay cycle. There are things like usually the aggregation of what kind of purchases is it going to be? Is it going to be a minor purchase? Is it going to require a contract? And from there, create a couple of sub processes. So if it is a major expense that you have to pay for on a contract level over a couple of years, for example, then you have to think about legal processes that support the procurement to pay process itself. So basically, you structure it first. You define what kind of purchase is going to occur, and automate the approval portion. So first, if you say you have typically 3 or 4 groups, contracts, major purchases, minor purchases, cash purchases. Depending on that, you initiate an approval process where you go in and say, based upon the policies, I pre-approve certain things within a threshold of X amount of dollars. So if you say Kai orders a piece of a pen and a block, an old block. So that's within certain things I don't need to ask permission for, and the pre-programmed policy pre-approves whenever I ask for that. Once that happens, and we conclude the approval process, then you invoke the delivery process itself, where you kind of make sure that the purchase department gets the instructions, the details, goes out with the pre-approved providers, quote with them, do the purchase, register the delivery, and delivers the goods to the internal people. So those are the process components, so to say. So it can be something very simple, depending on what block you look at. Yeah. But yeah, we can go also offline. Yeah, if somebody wants to look at the other components, because there's enough material there for at least an hour to go through.
Maybe another webinar.
Yep.
So the last question, how can I connect my forms with database and shift from one form to another?
Well, the fact is that you have 3 layers. You have the layer of the process, which is the orchestration of this task. You have the layer of the data, which is mainly through the business management or through an external business database. And you have the interface layer. Those 3 layers, we want them to be separate to make sure that you can, well, you don't have dependencies, and it's, first of all, it's more performant, but also it's easier to implement, maintain, and so on. So this 3-layer architecture, you will go through something called contract to make sure that everything you want to synchronize will communicate. So if you build data, you will go through the contract to make sure your data are connected to your process and then to your forms. That is explained. If you want, if you give your email address, we can give you explanations about that offline as well, because you have chapters explaining the way it works. And if you want your data going through the form without passing through the process, you can also use REST API, for example. That's a way to
Exactly. and also extend that to external data. So you can populate the form through native databases, and there the advantage, if you look at Bonitasoft, everything is SOA based. So it's basically object driven. You can declare local variables, global variables. So everything you define within Bonita itself, you can if you define it like this, reutilize throughout other forms, throughout different processes. So you declare a bunch of variables only a single time, and kind of recycle that going through the different process types and processes. But also, as you mentioned, Delphine, leveraging external process data with web services, APIs, and so forth, where you can kind of call in from SAP, for example, data that comes from outside that also populates the form.
Thank you both. So I think we're finished for today. Great session, really great presentation, a lot of questions. I have some more that are just coming, so I think we will answer them offline. But really interesting. So I let you guys just conclude if you have one last thing to say, and otherwise we will just end the session and meet you hopefully for the next webinar of the series.
Any famous last words?
My famous thank you, Kai.
No, thanks. It was a great session, and look forward to talking hopefully to all of you very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Follow us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.